There's no shame in finding yourself in your 40s, 50s, and 60s, not having saved what you wish you had saved, not having made the right investments. It happens to all of us. And that's one of the great things about this group, Catching Up to FI, is that it's a place where we can come together, not have any shame about that, support each other, and just take everyone where they are and find what we can do now to make things better going forward. The financial system is really set up for people to make all of the mistakes that my dad and so many other people have made throughout their life. The system is set up to part you from your money at every corner, and it's set up to do that no matter how smart you are, how responsible you are.
So environmental, governance, and socially responsible. Like, for instance, I think that there's one where they eliminated companies that invest heavily in private prisons and all kinds of different carve-outs. So if the environment might not be the thing that's most important to someone, there could be some other things that still fall under the ESG umbrella. And it doesn't have to be all or none, right? Like, you don't have to go strictly and do nothing but ESG. You can just include that as a part of your portfolio if you so desire to.
Welcome to Catching Up to FI, a podcast on mindset, money, and life for late starters of any age on their journey to financial independence. I'm Bill, and I'm a late starter.
I'm Jackie, and I'm also a late starter, and we're your host. We're here to help you on your journey to financial independence, no matter where you're starting.
We're going to talk to experts, other late starters, and explore topics related to our mission.
Join us as we catch up to FI together.
Hello, and welcome back to Catching Up to FI. I'm Bill Yount with my esteemed co-host, Jackie Cummins-Koski. Jackie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Bill. How you doing? We are excited to have our guest today, Kyle. We both know him, a very close FI friend, so this is going to be fun.
Yeah, well, let me introduce him real quick, and then we'll get on with the show. So Kyle Landis-Marinello lives in Vermont with his fantastic partner, 3 wonderful kids, and an amazing dog. We'll have to talk about that because I have 2 amazing dogs. He's a practicing attorney specializing in environmental and energy law. He received a master's degree in environmental law from Vermont Law School, where he lives, and a law degree from the University of Michigan, where even his free time was spent on study-related activities like being an editor of the Michigan Law Review, an esteemed school, actually. Now, this was all before kids, so he didn't know what else to do with his time. I'm sure he has plenty to do with his time now because I think he has 3 kids. When he turned his research skills towards personal finance and investing, he learned how to improve his family's finances by $300,000 in 1 year. This did not come from being wealthy or from compromising his values. This $300,000 change came from receiving forgiveness of federal student loans, refinancing a home and private student loans, and other methods to make more, spend less, and invest wisely. His passions are family, friends, kayaking, and I did not know that he was a competitive kayaker. We'll have to find out if he's still doing this. Frisbee, board games, comic books, and writing. Now, obviously, writing is a hobby because he wrote a book that he gave me and personally signed it for me. It's called Personal Finance and Investing: How Anyone Can Make More, Spend Less, and Invest Wisely. He's going to drop a lot of knowledge bombs for us today. I met him in economy, like a lot of friends in the FI space, and we are very happy to welcome Kyle to Catching Up to FI.
Thank you, Bill. It's great to be here with you and Jackie.
Hey, Kyle. Yeah, Bill had met you at Economy. I met you at a Camp FI in Virginia. And also, you helped me out last year at Economy when you came, and you walked me to my hotel in the dark at night when it's cold. And then you ran all the way back. So I appreciate you doing that. That's the true measure of a FI friend.
I was happy to, and I remember we had a great conversation during that walk.
We certainly did.
All right. So Kyle, we want to know a little bit more about you. I read your bio, and that's pretty sterile. Can you take us back? And this is a show a bit about money, but it's personal as well. Give us your concept of who you really are.
Yeah. So I would say family first. That's been a value of mine growing up, and in my family with my parents and my 2 siblings, and then in the family that my wife and I have created with our 3 children. And yeah, I also have spent a lot of time outdoors. I grew up in Vermont and would go hiking and sledding and skiing, and did get into competitive kayaking for many, many years. And being outdoors, being in nature is a big part of my life and my family's life and what we enjoy doing. And so that's driven my career as well. And that's what led me into environmental law and the choices I've made getting different jobs that focus on environmental law. It's affected the investments I've made when I got into personal finance and started learning about that angle of things and looking at socially responsible investing. And yeah, I would say one of the things I learned when I did a deep dive into the financial side of making things work is that you don't have to compromise your values. You can prioritize the family, you can prioritize protecting the environment. And in fact, sometimes those choices can be the most rewarding financially as well.
Well, okay. Now, in your book, you harp on your dad. So you didn't get maybe the best financial modeling growing up. Can you take us back to your earliest financial memories and then how your dad influenced you? Because honestly, you're quite the opposite of his approach to finances. Can you tell us a little bit about the dad story?
Yes, I'm happy to. So, a theme throughout my book is some financial mistakes that my dad made throughout the years. And just to be clear, I love my dad dearly. We have a wonderful relationship. We see each other on a regular basis, and I have enormous respect for him. And he has been and continues to be an incredible father. Yeah, but when it comes to money, he really has made every mistake in the book, figuratively and literally, because I do talk in the book about a lot of the mistakes he's made. And I do that for two reasons. One, I think it provides some entertainment value. I think others will get some chuckles out of reading some of the choices he's made and the stories behind that. But two, I want people to know that the financial system is really set up for people to make all of the mistakes that my dad and so many other people have made throughout their life. The system is set up to part you from your money at every corner. And it's set up to do that no matter how smart you are, how responsible you are. And my dad's a great example of this because he's brilliant. He went to Harvard at the age of 16. He started his own practice as a psychologist and has been doing that for going on 60 years now. And so he's successful every way. But when it comes to finances, it's been a struggle his whole life. And he's now 79 and is continuing to work and will continue to work because he hasn't been able to set money aside. So I think that it's a really good reminder for everyone that there's no shame in not having money figured out. There's no shame in finding yourself in your 40s, 50s, and 60s, not having saved what you wish you had saved, not having made the right investments. It happens to all of us. And that's one of the great things about this group, Catching Up to FI, is that it's a place where we can come together, not have any shame about that, support each other, and just take everyone where they are and find what we can do now to make things better going forward.
Well, Kyle, you didn't fall for it, right? You said your dad, he made a lot of mistakes or whatever, but you didn't fall for it. However, how long did it take you to figure some of this stuff out? Were you a late starter?
Yes, definitely. I am 43 now, and it's really just been in the last 5 years that I've started to learn about and make big decisions with my wife and our finances to really get our financial house in order. So I think it's a similar timeline to you, Jackie. I was fortunate enough to get an advanced copy of your book, Fire for Dummies,
Yay.
which is excellent,
Aw,
and
thank you.
everyone should get a copy. And I saw that for you, it was late 30s as well that you were really learning about this.
Yeah.
And so that is a common time for people to get introduced to the ideas of financial independence and how to take control of personal finance and investing.
Yeah, you made a lot of progress since then.
Yeah. Take us back to before the late start. Why did you have one in the first place?
So for me, there were some fundamentals that my wife and I figured out, and it was more by necessity than anything else. So I graduated law school about 16 years ago, and I had made it through undergraduate school with a full scholarship, and it even paid for my books. I was very fortunate that way to get through undergrad without a dime of debt. But then I got a master's degree and a law degree. And even with a scholarship at law school, I had $200,000 in debt on the day I
Wow.
graduated. And by the time I made my first payment, after a couple of years of deferring payments, it was at $230,000 and continued to go up over the years. At one point, it was around 260,000. I was taking jobs that were ones I was passionate about. I wanted to do public interest environmental law. I did really well at law school. Bill, as you mentioned, it is a prestigious law school. There were jobs handed out to my classmates that I could have taken as well that would have paid 4 to 5 times as much as the salary that I got when I decided to pursue the public interest side of things. But those jobs weren't the type of work I wanted to do. I really wanted to be fighting for the environment, and that was important to me and to our family. But that came with some real trade-offs. And so when you graduate with $200,000 of debt and you're starting positions in state government, that my first job was less than $40,000. It makes for some real difficulties in making ends meet. We also, as a family, decided that my wife wanted to stay home with our kids. And that was wonderful for our children. It was wonderful for her. It was what she wanted to do. But it also created financial challenges because unlike the dinks that you hear of, the dual income, no kids, we were what I call silks, single income, lot of kids.
It's a good one, Kyle.
Perfect. You heard it here first. I've never heard that one.
That's a new acronym in the fire community.
Yeah. And we had some really challenging times, and we really had to watch every expense very closely. And I remember coming home from work one day when I was working at the Vermont Attorney General's office, and my employer was the state of Vermont, and I knew I wasn't going to get a big salary when I was there, but they still have a process for getting a raise every year. And I had my meeting that afternoon with my boss, and he had told me about how I was doing incredible work, and it was a very glowing annual review. But he also broke the news that the budget didn't have money for a raise for me that year. And I wasn't expecting much. It was maybe $3,000. I thought my salary might go up, but I had assumed that was going to happen given that I had worked long hours and done good work all year. And I come home from work that day, and as I'm walking from my car to our back door, I see this cardboard box on the steps, and it was the weekly delivery from the state of Vermont of food that had arrived because our income that the state of Vermont paid me was so low that our family qualified for having that food delivered to our home. And it was a really hard moment. And and it really tested my commitment to public interest work. And so I had moments like that were challenges, were difficulties, but we got through them, and it forced us to be really careful with the money that we had. But I think it also prepared us for hitting the ground running later on when we did learn more about how we could handle our finances better and try to catch up to financial independence.
So I assume you had a state pension that was saving for you. Could you save any more than that, or were you budgeting down to every penny?
Really was just contributing to the state pension. And I had access to a 457. And boy, do I wish I could have contributed more money into that at the time, because I now know how great those funds are. A 457 is very similar to a 401k, but it has some benefits that don't exist and aren't available for a 401k. The 457 in particular allows you to have access to that money well before 59 and a half years old. But yeah, again, things were just so tight, it really wasn't an option to put money towards that.
Well, it sounds like you chose a low income lifestyle in a high debt lawyer profession, which is a very interesting choice. It's a value based choice, is what I'm hearing from you. And it had financial implications for you. Are you still in state employed or public service, or has that changed?
So I was in public service work for 15 years in different roles in state government. And then just in the last 6 months, I did change jobs. I went to the private sector, and it's not a large corporate law firm. I went to a small utility company that runs the transmission side of the grid for Vermont. And it's a really neat company that's actually set up in a way where we don't have any private shareholders, but rather any money that the company makes gets returned to local utilities to ultimately lower ratepayer expenses and cost. And so it's a really good fit for me in that it does pay better than the state government work I was doing. But I also feel like it's really important work that aligns with our family's values.
So, if I may dig into the numbers a little bit more, where did you end up in public service with your final salary there? Because the reason I want to dig into it is our audience is concerned that lower income folks and late starters can't reach FI. And we say that's not the case. And you are a living example that that will not be the case, even as a late starter. Did your income escalate to a certain point in public service? And then where did it jump to when you went private?
Yeah. So when I was in public service, again, started below 40,000, and I did advocate at every turn for getting the maximum raises that I could. And I did progress eventually into a management position the last 5 years that I was in state government. And so there were salary increases that went along with those advancements. And by the time I left state government, I was around 120,000. So much more than when I had started, but that really was at the tail end of the 15 years there. And for many of those years at the front end, it was right around 50,000, moving up to 60,000. It just progressed slowly along the way. And then when I went to the private sector, it was a good increase. It was not nearly the increase I would get if I went to work for a large law firm. It definitely did make the financial side of things much easier. And so we've really made a lot of progress in the last 6 months with that additional salary. I've been doing what everyone recommends that you do when you get a salary increase, of taking that extra money and saving as much of it as you possibly can.
So, did your lifestyle change at all?
Yeah, I would like to say we've had no lifestyle inflation whatsoever, but the reality is we have changed some things. I would say the biggest thing is we took a vacation this winter, and we used credit card points, and we traveled with another family, and that made it much more affordable than it might otherwise have been. But that was something we haven't been able to do in the past. And so it was really wonderful to be able to go on a family vacation in the middle of winter.
Hey, Catching Up to Fi audience. This is Bill Young telling you that we have some great sponsors here on our show these days. Jeremy Schneider, who's been on the show and is the founder of Personal Finance Club, has created a couple of great courses that he is giving to our audience at a $30 discount. Click on the link in the show notes to get this deal, and you can have the course How to Money Like a Millionaire, which normally is $99, but you can get it for $69 using the code CUTOFI if you click on the link in our show notes. The other course that he does is called Build Wealth by Investing in Index Funds. And again, this course is only $99 normally, and it's such a great value already, but you can get $30 off and pay $69 for this course as well. Now, why not take them both? Buy his Ultimate Personal Finance Bundle, which again is normally $149, but you get $30 off the bundle if you use the code CUTOFI. Go to the show notes and find the link for these courses and get started on your personal finance journey.
So, Kyle, I wanted to talk a little bit about like the student loan part. So,
Yeah.
Even though you worked for government, which meant that you qualified for the public service loan forgiveness. Is that right?
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not quite as direct a connection as it should be. That's how the program is supposed to operate is you work in state government, federal government, or for a nonprofit for 10 years and you can have your loans forgiven. The reality of the situation is that it took me almost 13 years to actually get forgiveness.
So why did it take that long? Yeah.
And this is not uncommon at all. In fact, a lot of people were worse off than I was. I had researched this program a ton. I was counting on it. And so I wanted to make sure I got it right. But I didn't do enough research. And when I graduated, my first couple jobs out of law school were clerking for judges. And those jobs paid so little that I didn't think I could pay anything towards my loans. And so I put them into forbearance. And I did that for a couple of years. And then it took a few months to get them out of forbearance when I did want to start paying them. And so I lost, over 2.5 years of times when if I had done the right paperwork, I think I actually could have made $0 payments and had them count towards forgiveness.
That is because your income was so low.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. That's pretty interesting. So I know that there's stuff on the studentaid.gov website, but there's so many confusing things with the student loan forgiveness and especially the public service loan forgiveness program. So I'm really glad that you were able to get yours forgiven. Tell us how much it was that you got forgiven and when.
Yes, it was just a minor sum of $230,000.
Wow. Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's huge. Oh
Yeah,
my God.
It's nice to hear the system work for you. You said you went in with eyes wide open because you had a high cost education, which is counterintuitive for what is recommended in the FI community. Did you go into it eyes wide open at that point when you picked your course of education? Or knowing that you were going to go for student loan forgiveness, so that was the plan? Or did you kind of back into it because, oh shit, I spent a lot of money on education, now I got to find a way to pay for it?
Yeah, so when I started law school, what I had actually researched the most was law school programs that had their own loan repayment assistance programs. And Michigan is one of those where during that 13-year period before I got the loan forgiveness, my law school was actually helping me make the payments I owed on my student loans. Because I went into public interest work, they had a program that allowed that. So that was what I was expecting when I went into law school. And then after my first year of law school, the program started where you could get the Grad Plus loans and they would be eligible for public service loan forgiveness. And there's a really interesting history to public service loan forgiveness. It was a bipartisan bill and it got people on both sides of the aisle because whatever your political views, you should want good attorneys prosecuting people who have been accused of crimes, and you should want good attorneys defending the folks who have been accused of crimes. And you should want good attorneys working in state government, in federal government, for nonprofit organizations doing that really important work. And I think that program really has been a success story in that it's gotten a lot of people to go into that work and provided an option for them to do it where it wouldn't otherwise be an option. Where I think the program has struggled is that you do have to jump through a lot of hoops, and there are a lot of stories out there of people who didn't do the right paperwork or consolidated or reconsolidated in the wrong way and lost a bunch of payments. I will say, because of the timing of this podcast when it's coming out, if you're listening and you have federal student loans, you should be talking to someone right away and finding out if you qualify for any of the loan forgiveness programs that are out there. Because there are other ones besides public service loan forgiveness. And the federal government right now is doing everything it can to help people get access to those programs. That has not always been the case, and that will not always be the case. That could be ending in the near future. So it's really important that people get on top of that if they have federal student loans.
Yeah.
One thing people do is consolidate loans or refinance loans. Can't you run into trouble with federal loans if you refinance them into the private sector?
Yes, definitely. So if you have private loans, those are generally going to be ones that you want to just find the lowest interest rate. And so I have some private loans left, even though I got $230,000 forgiven. I still have over $20,000 in private loans. And those you just want whichever company has the lowest interest rate. I will say I do boycott one company, SoFi, because they actually sued the federal government over the loan forgiveness programs. And I saw that as something that shows that they don't have their customers' best interests at heart. So that's a personal choice I made when I saw that, and others might not make that choice. So with private loans, you generally want whichever has the lowest interest rate. With the federal loans, I would definitely caution against refinancing those with a private lender. Some people have looked at their situation, realized they're never going to qualify for any forgiveness program, and it might make sense in that circumstance. But if there's any chance you might qualify for a federal forgiveness program that exists now or that may exist in the future, I think generally you want to keep those loans as federal loans.
Well, Kyle, first of all, thanks a lot. We'll never get SoFi to be a sponsor of the show.
Sorry. You can edit that part out.
No. We'll definitely keep it in because we want to hear your true thoughts about it. And that was something that I paid attention to as well. And so here you are, you were in your 40s before you got your student loans forgiven. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So we have a lot of 40-year-olds in our group that listen to our podcast. So they very well could have student loans. So I think you shared a lot of really good information. At least go to studentaid.gov, right? And see what your loans are. Once you refinance them outside of the federal student loan system, you are not going to get those special federal provisions. And one of the main ones was that COVID pause that we had. How long were we without, if you had federal student loans that you did not have to make a payment, was that like 3.5 years?
Yes, there were several years when you didn't have to make payments, and they weren't charging interest during that time either.
Right.
And so I do know this is a contentious issue, and a lot of people think, hey, you took out the loans, you should pay every dollar back. And there are people out there who are really opposed to any type of forgiveness program. My view on it, though, is I am unequivocally in favor of these forgiveness programs. And the reality of the situation is when you're going to college, even when you're going to grad school, people do not understand how much money they're taking out, how much it's going to cost, how much it's going to be hanging over them for decades of their life. And I really don't remember any of the documents that I signed when I took out my loans. I certainly didn't read them. Maybe I shouldn't say that now that I'm a lawyer, but I think that's the case for most people. And these programs are out there and they have rules around them. They're not just handed out money to whoever asks for them. It takes governmental action to forgive them. And if you qualify for that, then you should do that, is my opinion. And especially when I mentioned earlier, there are companies out there that are doing everything they can to part you from your money. And yeah, the lawsuit I mentioned that was brought against the federal government, it was because the private companies were losing money because the federal government is charging 0% interest and they couldn't compete with that. So they sued to get the courts to tell the federal government, you need to start charging interest on these student loans. And I look at the particular loans that I took out, and I mentioned the trajectory they took. They just kind of kept going up even when I was making payments, is because they had a 7.9% interest rate. And that might not sound too bad now when we're in a high interest rate environment. But when I took those loans out, I had a credit card that charged 4.9%. And so here's the federal government saying, we're going to charge you nearly double what credit card companies are charging. And so it's another way that the system really is set up to take advantage of people and people who can often least afford it.
Yeah, all that was so helpful, Kyle. We appreciate it. And for a big chunk of your life, you did work in public service, technically, for the state as an attorney. So thank you for your service and for doing that. We know that you could have been making a lot more money, right, if you were in private sector. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and then as you said, there's no shame in being a low-income professional, and you can absolutely do the things that you've done to improve your finances. Where you said you were a late starter with the 15 years in public service and the pension. Where do you think you were when you finished this tenure before you jumped into the private sector and said that you were able to increase your savings rate at that point?
Yeah. So again, I had very little saved in retirement accounts or anywhere. The 15 years towards the pension is very helpful, and that will be helpful when I turn 65. That will kick in. And between that and Social Security, when I'm in my late 60s, I will have a couple streams of income that are available. And so the amount I need to save to be financially independent is less because that pension is there. If I had stayed in state government, I could have put in another 15 years and around the age of 59 and had a full pension at that point. It would have been not a great pension, but it would have been enough to get by on. I think that with the changes I've made going into the private sector, that time frame has shortened. And so I'll have options to retire not long before 59, but I think it could be sooner than that. But it is still going to be a ways. I'm not someone who's ready to retire anytime soon. It'll be in my 50s at the earliest.
So, Kyle, just curious. So, as you're taking us through these, what is your quality of life like? Are you still very happy with the route that you took?
Yes. Yeah. I wouldn't change a thing. I think I have moments when I really did the deep dive into personal finance where I looked back at my career path and I realized I could have taken one of those jobs that paid with bonuses as much as 200 grand right out of law school and done it for 5, 6, 7 years. And if I had really played my cards right, maybe retired after that. And so I do have moments where I look back and think financially that certainly would have been a better path, but it wasn't really an option for me. That's not why I went to law school. It wasn't the type of work I wanted to do. And the work that I have done has been very rewarding, and it continues to be rewarding. Now, I still have options to go work at a law firm in a big city and double or triple or quadruple the salary I make at the moment, but I wouldn't see my kids nearly as much. I wouldn't feel good about the work I was doing. And yeah, there are always trade-offs. And I think a lot of what everyone's doing if you're on this path. And most people are not on this path. Most people don't know anything about what we talk about on this podcast and in the Facebook group and elsewhere. But if you're on this path, it's a constant balancing act between how much do I optimize the finances so that I can retire sooner, while also living life now, enjoying the experiences we can have now with our family, with our friends, doing the things we want to do, even though that does push the finish line a little bit further away.
Yeah, I've experienced that as well. I wasn't conscious. It sounds like you were relatively conscious of finances. You just couldn't do what you wanted to do with the value-based decisions you made, and it gave you more flexibility after you exited the public sector for the private sector. I was unconscious until 50. I could have absolutely, if I'd have been conscious 10, 15 years earlier, retired in my 50s. But that is not to be the case. And as you said, you want to live a life of no regrets. You really want to, and we did. We had a lot of experiences. Well, lifestyle inflation is great, right? you do a lot of stuff. We traveled a lot, boats named YOLO. We did a lot of things that gave us fond memories, built 2 houses. Just having not built a house would have gotten me to retirement. We made a lot of financially inappropriate decisions that at the time were fun. Lifestyle inflation is fun. And when you say your lifestyle is inflated, have there been things now that you're doing that you second guess or regret?
I mean, really, the level of inflation we've had has been pretty minimal compared to what I think most people do. And so we did buy a house 11 years ago. So at the time we bought it, we were living in about a 700 square foot apartment, but our third child had just been born and we had a dog at the time. So 5 of us and a dog in a 700 square foot apartment was pretty tight. So we got a house, but the house is about 1,400 square feet. It has 1 bathroom. 2 of our kids are teenagers now. Yeah, to have 5 people and a dog living in a house with 1 bathroom is tight. And there are times when my wife and I do think about, should we get something bigger? But my wife and I have done a lot of, even as tight as finances have been, that's always been a priority for us. And we found ways to do that. And when you've been to other countries that are not nearly as well off as the United States is, you see that a 1,400 square foot house is very luxurious. And the fact that 5 of us have to share a bathroom is a luxury as well, compared to a lot of places where you could have 2x, 3 times that amount of people in the same space. And so everything is relative. And it's kind of, when you have lots of friends and neighbors, and this happens a lot in the US, who get that bigger house, get the fancier cars, it's always tempting to do that. But luckily, we've been able to rein that in and really keep our eye on the ball, that at the end of the day, if your housing expenses, your transportation expenses, and your food expenses stay low, it goes a long ways towards reaching financial independence.
That's a very sobering perspective.
Yeah, and I don't know that I've met a lawyer that has found a way to live the life you lead. And it really shows folks that you can house hack, you can not let your lifestyle inflate, and you can be happy with what you have. I mean, a lot of late starters are not happy with what they have. They're not happy with a late start, but they have to look at what they do have as opposed to what they don't have. And it sounds like you have that right optimistic attitude that we want to get out to our listeners.
Yeah, and you made that trade-off. That's a trade-off you said you would not go back and change. So, yeah.
Yeah, and Ramit Sethi has this great saying about spending lavishly things on the things you care about and cutting mercilessly on the things you don't. And I think about that often because, I would say, I'm realizing now, Bill, I did the lawyerly thing of not really answering the question you asked earlier about ways we've had lifestyle inflation. And I would say One expense we have that is larger than most people is we do spend a lot on food. We don't go out very often, but we buy lots of organic food, lots of local produce. And yeah, my wife is really into gardening, and she will spend a lot on the garden to get the most local produce you can get. And yeah, so those things are important to us because I see them as investments in our health and our community, to get our food near where we live whenever possible and get organic food when we can. And so there are things like that, yeah, a lot of people in the fire community would look at and say, well, that's a waste of money. But to us, it's worth it.
You may have heard of a new financial planning platform called Nectarine. It's at hellonectarine.com. And this is put out by our friend Jeremy Schneider, who runs the famous Personal Finance Club. If you're on Instagram, you have seen his sketches, and he is awesome. He is well respected. He knows what he's doing. And one of the big questions that he never had a good answer to was, how do I find a good financial planner that is flat fee advice only? He didn't have an answer. So you know what he did as an entrepreneur? He created a platform. And that platform is Nectarine, where it's a $150 flat fee for a 1-hour session. And this is with vetted advice only planners. Most are CFPs, which stands for Certified Financial Planners, or other credentialed and licensed professionals. That's an important nuance. And again, this is brought to you by Personal Finance Club. I myself, as a nerd, went back to get my certified financial planner credential, and I know how valuable this credential is. And Jeremy wanted to make sure that he was only providing you with the best. So go to hellonectarine.com, and for a flat fee of $150 per hour, you get access to an advice-only financial planner. Check it out.
Well, speaking of green, you mentioned earlier ESG investing.
Mhm.
And so let's get back to the numbers for a minute. And it sounds like you're a proponent of this.
Mhm.
Can you take us through sort of your approach to investing, which may be different from others? Because we have not talked much about what ESG investing is and why we want to think about it. And then other things like, well, how does it perform compared to VTSAX?
Yeah. So environmental, social, and governance investing, or socially responsible investing, is a way of making sure that your money is not funding products and things that you don't believe in. And so the things that get screened out of socially responsible funds are things like companies, weapons manufacturers. There are some screens now for companies that are disproportionately contributing to climate change. So it's a way of looking at investing as not just a means to an end, which is ultimately an important and the most important part of investing. You're putting your money there so that later on you end up with more. I would say socially responsible investing also looks at what's your money doing in the meantime, because it's not just sitting there. The companies you're invested in use that money to make their products and to put them out in the world and to build their businesses. And I do want to be clear, I do not hold it against anyone in any way, shape, or form if they say, that's too complicated. I don't have anything to do with it. I just want to do regular investing. Social responsible investing is not for everyone. If you do choose to do it, it's become much easier than it was even 5 or 10 years ago. And the way that's happened is that more of these funds have become available and accessible. The general trend we've been seeing in the investing world towards index funds, which is a great trend. I think, again, no investment advice on this podcast, but we've all read J.L. Collins' incredible book, A Simple Path to Wealth. I've loved hearing him on this podcast. And we know he really did a deep dive into what works from an investing standpoint. And passive index funds generally win out over active investing. They have much lower fees and they tend to perform better. I was looking recently at some of the statistics in that book, and J.L. Collins says that less than 1% of actively managed funds perform better than an index fund. And so index funds, in my view, are generally the way to go. And what's great now is you can get socially responsible index funds. And so that's something I talk about in my book, that Fidelity has created socially responsible index funds that match the traditional Bogleheads 3-fund portfolio. And so that's my approach to have money in a socially responsible domestic stock fund, money in a socially responsible international stock fund, and money in a socially responsible bond fund.
So you stick to a 3-fund portfolio, but ESG style.
Exactly. Yes. And the allocation I've gone with, again, this is not advice for anyone. You always need to do your own research, but it's about 90% stocks, and I divide it with it slightly more in the domestic stocks than the international stocks.
Okay. Well, how long have you been doing this first, and how have you found that you've seen performance compared to the traditional 3-fund portfolio or the simple path to wealth approach?
So I've been doing it for about 5 years since I learned about this stuff. So I can't speak too much to long-term trends. Generally, especially with the index funds, it tracks almost identically with the VTSAX or the international equivalent of a international social responsible fund, because it is an index fund that's almost identical, just with a few companies cut out of it because they don't meet the social responsible criteria. There is some really interesting research that says that some social responsible funds can actually do a little better in the long run. And I think the reason for that is that if a company is getting screened out of a socially responsible fund, that company is probably not likely to be around or doing great 10, 20, 30 years from now. And so it might not be a company you want to be invested in anyways.
Yeah, and I know ESG typically is tied to environment, but there's like other that fall under the ESG. So environmental, governance, and socially responsible. Like for instance, I think that there's one where they eliminated companies that invest heavily in private prisons and all kinds of different carve outs. So if the environment might not be the thing that's most important to someone, there could be some other things that still fall under the ESG umbrella. And it doesn't have to be all or none, right? Like you don't have to go strictly and do nothing but ESG. You can just include that as a part of your portfolio if you so desire to.
Yes, yeah. And a very exciting thing that's happening this week actually is our daughter had her first job last summer and made some money from it. And we're going to start a Roth IRA for her. And I talked with her about investing, and she got excited about a social responsible fund that is focused on elevating women's leadership.
Excellent.
And it really looks at companies that have female leaders and have been making a lot of progress in that space. And that's something that's important to her. And there's a fund that matches that. So that's not an index fund. So it does carry higher fees, unfortunately. But hey, to get someone excited about investing at a young age and show her that there are investments for whatever is important to you, I think that's worth it.
You mentioned fees, and it does cost you a little more to invest socially responsible. Is it a significant difference, and will it make a significant difference over the long haul? Because I think if I remember correctly, at the S&P 500, you can get it 3 basis points, and socially responsible funds are somewhere around 9 or 10, right?
So that's again something, yeah, that it used to be if you wanted a socially responsible fund, you were paying around 1% in fees. It was a lot. And now the ones that I have through Fidelity are 0.14 is the fee. So yes, that's more than 0.03 or 0.04 that you get for VTSAX or one of those general index funds, but it's not much more. And it's way better than the 0.8, 0.9, 1%, 1.1, all of those fees that used to be charged for these types of funds.
Well, we'd like to encourage our audience to at least look at this. Mr. Money Mustache, who we had on or we recorded with, I think last week, has done an article or two on this and actually has graphs looking at the performance. What I found interesting when I looked at them is during COVID, these funds did really well compared to the S&P 500.
Yeah, and a lot of us know Carl Jensen, and I know his investing history. He's made a lot of money in an electric vehicle company that I won't say their name because maybe they'll become a sponsor.
Right.
And
And for the audience, you're talking about Mr. 1500 Days is his website?
yes, yeah. But that was a company I think that he looked and saw where they were going and saw where the industry was going, and did think, yeah, you fast forward 10 years, probably electric vehicle manufacturers are going to be doing better than other companies. So there is something to that. And it doesn't surprise me that Mr. Money Mustache is looking into this more, because I met him in economy last year, and I know that he really believes a lot of what the FIRE movement is doing is pulling people away from consumer culture, including the environmental damage that can come from consumer culture. One memory I have of Pete is going to the elevator bank at the Fairfield at the economy conference, and you don't want to take the stairs, and and he did guilt me into taking the stairs the rest of that conference, instead of using the elevator bank. And to be clear, there are many people who need the elevators. This isn't for everyone, but it is something that just never occurred to me. In my mind, you see an elevator, you take it. But if there's another way to get there, whether it's using your legs, or he's a big proponent of biking, if you can bike instead of driving, there is something to be said for that for the people who can do that.
Well, you talk about intentionality, right? I mean, these are value-based decisions where he puts his money, literally, or his mustache, where his mouth is.
Yeah, Bill. And I was thinking, I'm probably one of those guilty people that I probably was on the second floor and I was still taking the elevator, and I don't put plastic bottles. I mix plastic bottles in with my regular trash. I shouldn't be doing that, Kyle.
Well, it doesn't take much more than a little forethought, because as you mentioned before, the consumer culture is sort of gravitational in its pull. And we must, in the FI community, we fight gravity. We fight the natural gravity of our country and our culture. It's not hard, though. It may be simple to do, but it's not easy to do this in some ways, because the Joneses are doing it differently, and we're almost all Joneses.
Yeah. And I think it's, again, I don't want to sound preachy about any of this stuff. It's kind of, everyone has to figure out what makes sense for them. And Jackie, you'll feel good knowing that I'm the one who, my wife will actually save plastic bags and put them by the sink for us to wash and reuse. And they'll wait for when she's not looking and stuff them at the bottom of the garbage bag, because I want to go to bed and not do more dishes.
Oh, God. Yeah, I'm guilty of a whole lot of stuff. I drive a car that requires premium gas and probably all the things that I just maybe shouldn't do, but I try to be conscientious in other areas. So like you said, everyone kind of has to find their own values and ways that they deem to fit into whatever their lifestyle and values are.
Well, Kyle, there is something in your book, and we're going to shift again to the numbers, that I want to bring up for our audience, because everybody wants to know, should I save? Should I invest? Should I pay debt down? And there are cash flow waterfalls for this. There are rules of thumb. But you have a great way of looking at numbers to sort of help you make these decisions. And how do you do that? Can you walk us through sort of a chart you have in your book that I found that I had not seen anywhere else and makes intuitive sense?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So there's a debate that comes up all the time in the personal finance world of what makes the most mathematical sense versus what's the psychology of it. And both are important and both matter. But I found, for me personally, and I think some of this really is important, it's even more important to the catching up to FI crowd, that the math side needs to be prioritized. And if you can make that work in a way that psychologically motivates you and it makes you feel good about what you're doing and keeps you on track to do that, I think even better. And so my approach to where to put money when you have extra money available to you is a very mathematical approach. And so what I do is I look at the investment options that I have and my expected return for those investments. And I look at the debt that we have and the interest rate that's charged on that debt. And I order the investments and the debt by interest rate, by the percentage of interest rate, whether it's a positive number for an investment or a negative number for a debt. So if you have a credit card that charges 22% interest rate, that goes above your Roth IRA account where you're expecting a 9% return on that investment. But the 9% return your investment goes above a 7% car loan that you took out. And all of that is above a 3% mortgage if you were fortunate enough to get a mortgage at a time when rates were low. And so that's the approach that I recommend is, and you can do it on one single sheet of paper. Just look at all of your debts and all of your investments, or if you haven't started investing yet, your potential investments, and rank them from highest interest rate, positive or negative, to lowest interest rate. And that gives you your priority for where to put money.
Yeah, I like the fact that at the very top of the list is 103% return with your match. We talk about don't mess up the free money, and when you have if you look at it as 100 to 103% return, your hair is on fire. You better be doing that.
Yeah. I mean, and a lot of people don't like their company 401ks because they might not have great investment options, but it doesn't matter what the investment option is. If you get a company match, that is a doubling of your money the moment it hits the account. And so, yeah, definitely that's going to be the top priority for anyone who has access to a company match.
All right, Jackie. We're just about in an hour and we're trying to stick to it. We've run through a bunch of great stuff with Kyle. Do you have any final questions for him, for our late starter audience?
Well, I was going to at least mention his book, and I really liked it. What was the name of your book, Kyle? Because it was a great read and it had some things in there that we haven't seen anywhere else, like Bill was mentioning.
Thanks, Jackie. Yeah, it's called Personal Finance and Investing. You can get it at your local bookstore. They'll have to special order it. They probably won't have it on the shelf, or you can get it through Amazon or anywhere else online. I did have a thought, Jackie, as I was planning for this podcast, which is I was looking at your new book, Fire for Dummies, and I noticed it's on Amazon to order the paperback copy.
Yeah.
My paperback is $15 on Amazon. If anyone orders those two books and does not get $40 worth of value out of them, come see me at Economy in 2025, and I will have $40 in my wallet to give you.
Oh, look at that. You know what? And Kyle, I'll match that plus $2. How about that? I love my $2 bill, so I'll give them an extra $2 bill.
All right. Well, we're going to have a breakout session. We're going to have a Catching Up to FI meetup. We're going to have to ask this question, and we better come with a lot of money, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well,
so I mean, he dropped so many gems already for late starters. Kyle, you're a late starter yourself, but I think one of the big takeaways, Bill, is that Kyle, you made some conscientious decisions and you stuck with your values. And if that is what gave you a little bit of a late start, then you would have done it the same way if you had it to do all over again. So that's really sobering to hear. And we appreciate you joining the show today. And I know that our audience will get a lot out of it. We love to hear these different stories, these different perspectives, right, Bill?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And we wouldn't be here without our backup team, right, Jackie? We have to give credit where credit is due. Right. And we must give credit to Diana Falk, who does our social media. We must give credit to Sarah, who does our show notes, and to Fritz Boston,
does an awesome job.
Is our virtual assistant and does the editing. And we wouldn't sound as good without Fritz. So thank you, Fritz. There is one call to action I want to give you guys. This does have a cost to it. We're not as green as we want to be. And if you want to buy us a coffee and support this podcast, you can go to Buy Me a Coffee or go to the Support Us button on our webpage, and we really would appreciate if you buy us a coffee or two. It helps defray some of the costs of running the show. So Kyle, thanks for being with us here today. It's awesome to see you. I look forward to seeing you at Economy next year, if not sooner.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Jackie. And thank you not just for this wonderful discussion we've had, but for this incredible podcast and community and all of the work you do to help people. You are two people who very much live your values, and it's greatly appreciated.
Well, thanks for joining us
Thank you
today.
for saying that. I was a little worried for a while that I was doing everything wrong, but thank you for saying that.
No, you can get, it's the 80-20 rule. Just get 20% of it right and you get 80% of the work done. And we're not perfect. Nobody is. Good enough, as my wife says, is good enough. All right, guys. We'll see you next week on Catching Up to FI.
So, Bill, as you know, we cannot do this show without our amazing staff and the people that help us put this on. So our social media is Diana Falk, our editor Fritz Bassard, and show notes are done by Sarah von Sternberg. We love them and they keep us going.
Yeah, I mean, this show wouldn't have the quality it has without our folks, our peeps. And we'd also like to give you a few calls to action for the show. We love our community and we hope you love us back. If you want to support the show and what we're doing, you can do that at Buy Me a Coffee, which is a platform that allows you to virtually say thank you if you get value from our content. The link is in the show notes, or you can head over to our website at catchinguptofy.com and click on the Support the Podcast tab at the top right. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Catching Up to FI. We would appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star review so that our message can reach others.
While we are financial educators, and I'm a financial professional that loves to teach, our content is for general education and information purposes only. We are not providing financial, legal, or tax advice. Always do your own research or consult a professional before making important decisions.
We'll see you next time on Catching Up to FI.